Hi there. In this video segment, we're going to work with the Cybex chest press machine. You're probably asking yourself, well, why are we going to be working with a machine instead of using other pieces of equipment? Main reason, direction of force. And what I mean by that, the direction of resistance is always the same. So, when you're using dumbbells, when you're using pulleys, you're always having to work on stability, right? That's part of what free weight is creating instability. Not saying that this is better than that. It's just for somebody, let's say, learning how to actually work on a chest press pattern. This is a nice fixed position. Makes it a little easier to control and a lot safer. Now, one big benefit of this is strengthening the upper body. We will be working primarily through the pectoralis muscles, pec major specifically, anterior deltoid, part of the front of the shoulder, and triceps muscles, part of the upper arm. It's a multi-jointed movement, so we're working through two different joints, being the elbow and the actual shoulder. So we want to make sure that we're okay on that. If you have any pre-existing issues, an elbow issue or a shoulder issue, you might want to get that checked out before doing this one. So, before we start, there is something that I want to take a look at, and that's going to be ranges of motion. Do we have the requisite to be able to use this piece of equipment? And if we do, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the best piece of equipment for us, but it's a good starting point. And as we go forward, I'll explain some modifications that can be done. Whether they're going to work for you or not, that's something you'll have to experiment with yourself. And there's a way to make it even better, but that's something that is a whole nother topic. We can talk to me one-on-one. So, as we go forward, we talked about ranges of motion, so we're going to test out first just the ability to be able to lift the arm up. That's what we call shoulder flexion. Now, granted, you may have a lot more range of motion than that. For this specific piece, and specific to the profile of this piece of equipment, you don't need a whole bunch more than this. Now, the other thing is bringing the elbows back. That's actually moving at the shoulder. Granted, the elbows are bending. We call this one horizontal abduction. So, here's the thing. Just because you can go further back doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be better for you as far as this piece goes. We're not trying to stretch here. We're working on strengthening. Don't ever forget that. A lot of times folks will get on these machines and they'll try to crank their positions back as far as possible just to potentially actually hurt the shoulder or even tear a muscle, that is. So let's take a quick glance. I'll better explain the requisite range of motion. But before we actually do so, let's take a quick glance at the machine itself. There's actually two adjustments here, the chair adjustment and the actual backrest itself. I'll explain where those need to be, specific to your body type and your anatomy. We also have the weight adjustment. So as far as that goes, this piece in here is going to be the same across the board with many of our machines, as far as the selectorized pieces go. That top knob, you hear that little click, 5-pound increments. Starting at the 0, clicks up to 15. If you had it on 0, and you had no weight actually through the pin on the plates themselves, the machine's running at 10 pounds. So for somebody that, let's say, is pretty weak for the most part, and just doesn't have the ability to do free weight or comfortable enough, then you can try this out. See if that 10 pounds is actually good enough for you. And when I say 10 pounds, it's what they rate the machine, but with all the pulleys designed built in within it, might feel a little lighter than that. So you can give that a go, see if it's worthwhile for you, and if it's too heavy, then let us know. We'll find another solution for you, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'll start this one off pretty light. I'm going to go to 30 pounds. Leave it there, right, for demonstration purposes. Now, we talked about range of motion, right? But we also have to consider that with seat positioning, where we need to be. So if I came and sat on this piece like this, probably doesn't look right, like it's right for me, all right? Look how far these handles are relative to my body. And looking at the profile design of this machine, actually the direction of force is going to go kind of almost similar to what we see here. So if I press this, this is going to be way up, all right? That's going to be pretty much just shoulder, right? And I'm not getting a whole bunch out of my chest, which is what I should be working on primarily. So an easy go-to to start off is just making sure that we're at least kind of mid-chest level. Now even this top position actually doesn't work for me because it puts me up kind of above it, right? This falls below me. So I'm going to bring this down one click. Don't worry about numbers so much. Just find your positions. That's the big one. Learning to feel where you need to be based on what I'm telling you here. So I'll lift my arm up, actually take a quick glance, and I'll check this is about mid-chest height, right? I can actually even rest my arms across here and see where this is lined up at. It actually looks pretty good. Now I'll bring my hands back, and this is about my end range, but I'll demonstrate what you don't want to do. All right, sometimes this machine will have this all the way forward. Let's say somebody had a lot of range of motion and they brought that seat all the way forward. I'll bring my arms back, and as you can see, I'm not clearing this. This is not going to work. Now, folks will do this. They'll tuck themselves in and get in there. Granted, it looks normal, it looks okay from here. It's not, okay? I'll do this in slow motion. If I bring my arm back here and I start bending my body into this, I'm actually rotating at the shoulder. See how that elbow is dipping down? So that ends up being something like this. Not good. A lot of stress on the rotator cuff, into those smaller muscles, through the actual shoulder joint that is. As I start pressing that, that's going to create a tremendous amount of force through my actual shoulder joint and not in a position that I need to be in, all right? So this is what you don't want to do, okay? Now, another thing. Let's say it's all the way back here. And I notice, whoa, I got a lot more range of motion than what I am able to do here. Granted, it's not saying you can't work from here. I mean, sure, I can work from here. I can press, no problem, right? But if I want to maximize this and work within my viable range, then I need to make sure that I'm in an appropriate position. So I'll bring this up one click, and we're back to where we started. Okay, so I was able to get in here, extend my wrist just a little bit. I didn't bring this down all the way, and found my position. Comfortable for me. Now here's the other thing. We need to make sure that we're set in a pretty decent spot for this position as far as the seat goes, and we're actually utilizing the muscles that we need to be with this exercise. There are many ways of cheating on this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually adjust the angle now so that you can see it from a kind of slightly lateral view. I have to explain a little more in depth as far as the positioning of the shoulder blades relative to this exercise so that we're not implementing them and working some of the other smaller muscle groups, okay? So, sorry about the camera change. I'm going to come out of the frame for a sec. This is a one-man operation. Okay, so here I am again, and I'm going to go ahead and set my position. Now, try not to death grip this. A lot of times folks will grab this and squeeze as hard as they can. You really don't have to. Look, I can keep an open grip like this. That's another nice thing about using a piece of machine equipment, is that I don't need to worry about something falling on my hands. Now, shoulder blades. A lot of times you'll see folks, they'll press and they'll round the upper back, right? Not good, okay? And the reason for that is because as I draw that shoulder blade forward, now I'm pushing the shoulder into this forward position, kind of crunching in some of these smaller muscles. One of them actually being what we call the subscapularis. It immediately rotates the shoulder and actually adducts it as well, horizontally. And it kind of sets a really poor position for that muscle to be engaged in. It's not really meant to be used that way. For this specific piece, that is. Granted, we're doing it for another exercise. It's okay, but I'd have to explain that in another video. So, what I want you to do is, you're going to set your position. The shoulder blades are actually going to pin. All right, and this is a little cue you'll remember. Pin, puff, and press, all right? So I want you to pin the shoulder blades back. Let's say you had something really fine up between your back and the actual machine's seat, and you kept pressure against it because you didn't want it to slide out. Now, granted, this will create a little bit of space through the lower back. If you have a back issue, you might want to find something to accommodate and fill the space here. We have plenty of pads lying around. You can find something, I'm sure. Now, as I pin my shoulder blades, what that's doing is actually preventing the shoulder blades from drawing forward. It's preventing from utilizing other muscles like I mentioned earlier. It's actually also preventing the rib cage from collapsing forward. So, shoulder blades are pinned back. I've set my position. What this is going to allow me to do also is recruit some of the muscles in more of the costal fibers of my pec muscle. So granted, if I'm here, I may not get so much of this stuff. It'll be more up here, right? So opening up, I'm going to get quite a bit more involvement. Now, another thing, the shoulders, they shouldn't be way up here. if you took a quick glance, if I pressed like that, this is the direction that I'd be pressing in. It's not the way this machine's designed. As you can see, it presses at a slightly upward angle. So this is not going to work. That's going to create some odd forces through the actual shoulder joint itself. And guess what? The machine's going to win regardless. So when you set here, you've pinched your shoulder blades. What I want you to do is actually bring the elbows down a little bit relative to the actual machine. From there, I'm going to puff. When I say puff, you can take a breath in and then press. Good. Now, bringing that back, I want you to think about absorbing the force. You just don't want to drop the weight back, okay? Take your time with it. You're going to press, bring it back down with control, back down with control. At no point in my shoulder blades actually breaking away. That's a big one. A lot of times folks just do this not really knowing it. You'll notice they crunch, the neck comes forward. You should be pretty much pinned up against this seat rest. Now, I mentioned earlier that we can actually do this with a single arm. So, I'll show you real quickly. And when you do it with a single arm, what I recommend is actually bringing the other arm up. And what that'll do is it'll help create a little bit of stability for you versus, let's say if I just did this with one arm, now I have to kind of fight against forces trying to pull me, right? Having that weight on the opposite end out here already creates a level of contraction here to create some stability. It helps hold me in position, in other words. So that's another thing you can do with this. Now, if, let's say, you had a limitation through an actual arm, let's say, for instance, you were able to get the arm up here, but only able to get it up so high here, right? Or let's say even positioning as far as bringing it back. Then we want to always go with the arm that has the limitation. Okay, so if I were to have a limitation coming back, I'd recommend you bringing the seat back. Okay, that might make it a little bit easier for you so you can set your position. Now granted, you won't be challenging the one arm that has that range, but that's okay. And when I say challenging, I mean you just won't be challenging through its full range of motion. But you have to respect your anatomy, you have to respect what you're working with. Always remember that. So another thing we can do actually, I'll come back to my position, is as you can see this machine has the ability to actually come inwards. All right, there's no tension here, but it does take a little bit of work actually to maintain positions holding here, right? So I always recommend if you're trying to play around with those angles, because what will happen here is this will come across the midline of the body. Now, this actually mimics the best way to get the contractile effect of the pectoralis major muscle here, right? So coming across here to that midline is going to allow you to create a shortening of that muscle. That means a full contraction versus straight out here, it's not going to hit it as much. You might feel more shoulder, some involvement of the tricep, and a little bit of that pec, unless you went heavier, that was. But that's not always the best case scenario. So there is a way to work around that. That's something, like I said earlier, we would have to talk to on a one-on-one basis. So you can come pick my brain. But if you decided you wanted to play around with this a little bit, I would recommend you going lighter on the weights and trying that out. Squeezing. You'll notice this is challenging because it's going to move back into its original position. I'm not a big fan of the design of that, but if that's something you want to kind of play around with a little bit, you can, all right? So easiest would be holding the arm out here and bringing this in and pressing out to the center. Slow on the end and pressing. Bring it back down. Okay, so let's recap real quick. Check my ranges. Am I good? Do I have any pain, discomfort? I'm going to take a seat. I'm going to make my adjustments based on my range. So if it's too low, I'll notice this isn't in the right spot. I mentioned, think midpoint of the chest. That's about right for me. Now, I'm going to check my ranges. That actually works well. I don't have to really get into any funny positions. From here, shoulder blades back. I'm going to pinch, puff, press, and bring it down, absorbing it. That's the big one. Absorb it, don't just let it drop. If I had a limited shoulder, I can do a single arm variation of this. Or if I just wanted to work on one arm at a time, I can do that. I mentioned pressing one arm at a time, keeping one arm out, helps to create a little more stability. I also mentioned where we can work pressing with a little more inward emphasis. So, bring that down, inwards, pressing across. That's going to allow you to run a little more in line with the anatomy of the actual muscles that we're trying to target here. That is your chest press machine. You now know how to set it up properly. If you feel any pain or discomfort through your shoulders, discontinue, come ask one of us. We'll see if we can show you a modified position that works better for you. If not, probably not ready for this piece yet. Maybe it's not best for you. And off the top of my mind, that's about all I have. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope it's useful for you. Have a great day now. Take care.